Hey, folks, we'll get to all the news in just 1 second. First, I have to remind you that Mr. Bertram is out right now, Daily Wire Plus. It is our brand new animated series created by Adam Carolla, starring Adam and Megyn Kelly and Roseanne Barr and a cast of real all-stars in the comedy world. Here's a little bit of what it looks like.
Let me be clear. Like me, Wood doesn't care about your feelings. If you hurt Wood, Wood will hurt you back. Wood doesn't discriminate. Wood's only true enemy is the donkey. I discipline based on the donkey system. I hand out donkey points when you act stupid, abuse the tools, or I just don't like you.
What if I have to?
Or if you ask dumb questions. Donkey. Simple as that. Now, every time you get a donkey point, like Davey here, you move your donkey across the board. And when you get to the end, well, where do donkeys go?
To the corral!
Exactly. I made those benches with rough sawn cedar to maximize discomfort. I also sold a couple to the DMV.
So go check that out right now at Daily Wire Plus. Now on to the news. So the Democratic Party is totally disconnected from reality. I mean, totally disconnected from the normies. And that is why Joe Biden is in serious trouble. I give you as Exhibit A today, not Joe Biden, but Nancy Pelosi. So Nancy Pelosi, the former Speaker of the House, and still, of course, a very influential voice inside the Democratic Party, she was at Oxford Union Society doing a debate over populism with Winston Marshall, the former musician from Mumford and Sons. And at that debate, she started tearing into populism in language that sounds very much like Barack Obama circa 2008. You remember that in 2008, Barack Obama was running for president of the United States, and he suggested that the problem with the country is that it was filled with bitter clingers, people who are still relying on God and guns and all these terrible things, religion. Well, Nancy Pelosi is still doing that routine. Here she was ripping into the normies.
Of these poor souls who are looking for some answers. We've given them to them, but they're blocked by some of their views on guns. They have the 3 Gs, guns, gays, God, that would be a woman's right to choose. And the cultural issues cloud some of their reception of an argument that really is in their interest.
Okay, so according to Nancy Pelosi, the reason people are not voting Democrat as much as they should be is because they are blocked by cultural factors like guns and God and gays. Now, that's an absurdly reductive view of people on the other side of the aisle. It turns out that the vast majority of people in the United States just want to be left alone. They want to be part of solid family structures. They want to be involved in their local church or local synagogue. They want to be involved in the social fabric building that is things like religion. Nancy Pelosi herself is supposedly a religious Catholic, although, again, I will question just how religious you are when you support transgenderism, same-sex marriage, and abortion as a point of course in your politics. But she's supposed to understand all of that, but she doesn't, because there is a radical wing of the Democratic Party that has now taken the helm in the center of the Democratic Party. Remember, Nancy Pelosi used to be more moderate than she is. Barack Obama shifted the party to the left, and then Bernie Sanders shifted the party even more to the left. And all Joe Biden is a stand-in for a weather vane. He is just a human weather vane. He is no longer sentient, if he ever was. Even when he was sentient, he was a weather vane. Now he is an inanimate object at the center of the Democratic Party. He is a cork bobbing on the waves of the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party has decided to cave to its most radical members, people who apparently think that God is very bad and that guns are very bad and that the vast majority of Americans are only voting Republican because they hate gay people or some such nonsense. That is not a winning formula. The people that the Democratic Party are catering to right now are an army of losers. I've mentioned this. That's not every Democratic voter. The vast majority of Democratic voters are not members of the army of losers. I'm talking here about people who wish to rebel against the meritocracy, who believe that traditional values are inherently wrong and bad. The kinds of people who led a student walkout at Duke University because Jerry Seinfeld was speaking, which is something that happened over the weekend.
Jerry is also serving as our commencement speaker today.
So as you can see, this is about 30 students who lead this walkout and they are guided out. People are cheering because they're being guided out by the cops. There are about 6,600 students here. So it is a very small minority. And you can hear the students booing the walkouts. Okay, there's a very small minority, but these are the people that the Democratic Party is catering to. They're catering to the people like the graduate of Columbia University. They had the graduation over the weekend. And one graduate of Columbia University decided because she was wearing a keffiyeh and because she hates Israel, that she was going to rip up her worthless diploma, which is fine. I mean, honestly, she had a master's of social work, so she may as well burn the diploma anyway, since that's a useless degree. Here she was. This is being celebrated. She walked up wearing handcuffs and a keffiyeh, and then she starts tearing up her diploma, and then holding up her cap to the applause of pretty much no one. Of course, this was all to be expected because, again, she had her flag membership in the army of losers emblazoned right on her graduation outfit. She had the ribbon around her neck, and it had the Trans Pride Progress flag and Palestinian flag and all the rest of that sort of stuff. These are the people to whom the Democratic Party has decided to appeal. This is the clear logic of the Democratic Party at this point. Internationally, by the way, the left has done the same thing. A good example of this was over at Eurovision. So Eurovision is this huge event in Europe. Every year, they have a competitor from each European and Western country compete. And the people who win are typically members of the army of losers, far leftists who hate traditional values. The winner this year was a non-binary Swiss rapper. If this is good music to you, then I challenge whether you have eardrums or not.
Let me taste the lows and highs. Let me feel that burning fire.
This is the person who won. Non-binary rapper, which means a dude who dresses in ladies' clothing sometimes. And that was not the only competitor in the army of losers. There is a competitor from Ireland who calls itself Bambie Thug, protesting Israel. This person is apparently a Satanist, which, I mean, honestly, would Satan even want this person? This is a bad look.
Because it has been so hard. It has been so hard. And I'm so proud of us. And I just want to say, we are what the Eurovision is. The EBU is not what the Eurovision is. The EBU, I don't even care anymore.
This human is this Satan-looking person.
The queers are coming.
The queers are coming.
Non-binaries.
Wow, the queers are coming. Non-binary, and of course, very upset that Israel is there. Why? Israel is the only tolerant country when it comes to alternative sexualities in the Middle East. Doesn't matter. The whole point is army of losers, which is why, of course, Eden Golan, who's a normal-looking woman who sang for Israel, ended up competing at Eurovision, was protested by literally tens of thousands of people, including Greta Thunberg, as we mentioned last week. And as it turns out, the normies are now having their revenge. Because when it came to the popular vote, the jury, there's two aspects of Eurovision. One is the jury vote, which is all of the elites who decide who was the best performer. And apparently they thought that Swiss non-binary rapper was just incredible and had to win. But when it came to the actual vote of, human beings living in Europe who voted, Israel ended up placing second in the popular vote. In fact, Israel topped the popular vote in Britain, Spain, Germany, France, Finland, Sweden, Holland, Belgium, Switzerland, Portugal, and Italy. Because as it turns out, people don't like the army of losers. We'll get to more on this in a moment. First, I want to let you in on something that I find highly irritating. As people on the plane, like I was yesterday, who assume that everyone else wants to listen to their garbage pop music, which did in fact happen yesterday. Like, why would I want to listen to JoJo Siwa ever? Well, you know what else is stupid and irritating? Not having life insurance. That's a dumb thing to do. Getting life insurance will give you peace of mind knowing that if something were to happen to you, your family could cover expenses while getting back on their feet. Policy Genius has licensed award-winning agents and technology that make it easy to compare life insurance quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks to find the lowest price. Their team of licensed experts is on hand to help you through the process. Even if you already have a life insurance policy through work, it might not offer enough protection for your family's needs. It might not follow you if you leave your job. Listen, you need to think about what happens to your family in case, God forbid, something happens to you. You think about it for like 5 minutes. You go to Policy Genius, you get it solved, then you don't think about it again. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies starting at just $292 per year for $1 million in coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid those unnecessary medical exams. Policy Genius works for you, not the insurance companies, which means they don't have an incentive to recommend one insurer over another. Save time, save money, provide your family with the financial safety net they need using Policy Genius. Head on over to policygenius.com/Shapiro. Get your free life insurance quotes. See how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/Shapiro. Again, there's a reason Hamas is emblematic of the army of losers. They are people who have created a victimhood status for themselves by engagement in terrorism and evil, and then claim that that's all the result of evil Western civilization. And so the army of losers likes to rush to their defense. This is who the Democratic Party has decided to fall in line with is the army of losers, and it is not paying off for them, because here is the latest polling data for Joe Biden. The latest polling data for Joe Biden, who has spent the last month basically undermining the state of Israel in its attempts to extirpate a terrorist group currently holding American hostages. Here is the polling data. Nevada is in a five-way race that includes Cornel West, as well as Jill Stein and RFK Jr. This is a battleground poll from New York Times Siena Research. Trump up in Nevada, 14 points, 44-30. Trump up in Arizona, 44-35. That is a 9-point lead. In Georgia, Trump up 8 points, 42-34. Pennsylvania, Trump up 4 points, 41-37. Wisconsin, Trump up 1 point, 40-39. Michigan, Trump up 3 points, 42-39. These are awful statistics for Joe Biden. Truly terrible statistics for Joe Biden. And those are races including RFK. Even when you take RFK out, Trump is currently leading in every single battleground state, according to the New York Times. What is going on there? Well, as it turns out, Joe Biden is losing the moderates. The normies don't like him. The people who don't like the army of losers don't like him. And again, that is large part of the Democratic base. That is all the moderates in the Democratic Party base who do not wish to overthrow the American meritocracy in the name of people who declare themselves victims, who don't have a lot of sympathy for Hamas, who don't believe that the queers are coming is the future of the West. These are just normal, everyday Americans who want to be left alone. They want to be able to earn a living. They want to be able to put food on the table. And they want their kids to have more opportunity than they had. That's it. That's all they want. And Joe Biden is not giving that to them. According to the New York Times, quote, the findings reveal widespread dissatisfaction with the state of the country and serious doubts about Mr. Biden's ability to deliver major improvements to American life. A majority of voters still desire the return to normalcy promised by Mr. Biden in the last campaign, but voters in battleground states remain particularly anxious, unsettled, and itching for change. Nearly 70% of voters say the country's political and economic systems need major changes or even to be torn down entirely. Only a sliver of Mr. Biden's supporters, just 13%, believe the president would bring major changes in his second term, while even many of those who dislike Trump grudgingly acknowledge he would shake up an unsatisfying status quo. The sense that Biden would do little to improve the nation's fortunes has helped erode his standing among young, Black, and Hispanic voters, who usually represent the foundation of any Democratic path to the presidency. Mr. Trump and Mr. Biden are essentially tied among 18 to 29-year-olds and Hispanic voters, even though each group gave Biden more than 60% of their vote in 2020. Trump also wins more than 20% of Black voters. Why is that happening? Now, what the left would say is that the reason that's happening is because Biden hasn't tacked far enough to the left. But that is a lie. It is not true at all. The reason that Joe Biden is falling apart is because he is losing the moderate middle. According to the New York Times, quote, Mr. Biden's losses are concentrated among moderate and conservative Democratic-leaning voters who think the system needs a major change or to be torn down altogether. Mr. Trump wins just 2% of Biden's very liberal 2020 voters who think the system at least need major changes, compared with 16% of those who are moderate or conservative. So what is Joe Biden aiming at? He's aiming at the 13% of voters who voted for him last time and aren't planning on voting for him this time. They're 80 out of 100%. They're 87% of Biden's voters who don't care about Gaza, who are shifting over to Trump. And then there are 13% who said they voted for Biden last time and that they say that the war in Gaza is important. But just 17% of those voters reported sympathizing with Israel over the Palestinians. So in other words, he's aiming at a fraction of his voting base to try and jog him over the line here. And it's not going to work. It is unbelievably stupid. It turns out that the normies don't like Hamas, and they don't like Joe Biden's focus on trying to draw a distinction between Israel and Hamas. Now, this polling data does show, for example, that the Democratic Party disproportionately likes the Palestinians. Then when you look, for example, here's the question. In a dispute between Israel and the Palestinians, which side do you sympathize with more, Israel or the Palestinians? In the 2024 vote, for Republicans, 65-8, they like Israel. For Biden voters, 34-25, they like the Palestinians, which, by the way, is totally delusional. That's totally delusional. I mean, that is crazy talk, considering the Palestinian population overtly supports terrorism in October 7th by every available polling metric. But they've been told a lot of lies by the media, whatever it is. That is a low priority issue for the vast majority of Democrats, including Democrats who are leaving Joe Biden behind. It is 13% of voters who are leaving Joe Biden behind who care deeply about Gaza. And that is the portion that Joe Biden is focusing on, which is nutso. We'll get to more on this in a moment. First, burgers are one of the most popular foods in America. Yeah, because they're awesome. Well, make this summer one to remember with Good Ranchers, because now that you're thinking about hamburgers, you should go take care of the beef. Right now, my listeners will get free Wagyu burgers for a year. My producer Zach's mouth is watering right now just by me talking about all of this burger. Simply go to goodranchers.com and subscribe to any of their custom curated boxes filled with 100% American beef, chicken, pork, or wild-caught seafood. Use code Shapiro at checkout to claim your free American Wagyu burgers for a year. And in case you needed any other reason to support Good Ranchers, they support the Paralyzed Veterans of America. Every order you make saves American farms and directly supports American vets. Change the way you buy meat today. Go to goodranchers.com, use code Shapiro to claim your free burgers for a year and support veterans this Memorial Day season. That's goodranchers.com, use code Shapiro. Goodranchers.com, promo code Shapiro. Good Ranchers is American meat delivered. Go check them out right now. Goodranchers.com, promo code Shapiro to get started. This is what Mark Penn writes over at the New York Times today. He points out that Joe Biden is aiming at the wrong percentage of the electorate. He says, scared candidates are, in my experience, easily sold the idea that the Democratic base or Republican base is going to stay home in November unless they're constantly fed what they want to hear. One call from the head of a religious group, a civil rights group, a labor group, and others, and fear runs through the campaign. A New York Times article this winter about black pastors warning the Biden White House that his Gaza war policy could imperil re-election is a good example. Maybe if Biden were running against a well-liked centrist opponent, concern could be justified. But during a fall election against Trump, the final month of this campaign is going to see a frenzy of get-out-the-vote efforts. I doubt the Democratic base is going to sit idly by at the thought of Trump cruising up to Pennsylvania Avenue. He says that it's insane for Joe Biden to be aiming at the Gaza contingent. He says Mr. Biden's campaign has fundamentally miscalculated on Israel. Nikki Haley voters are strong defense voters who would back ally Israel unreservedly, and I believe want to see a president who would be putting maximum pressure on Hamas to release hostages. By pandering to base voters with no choice, Biden is pushing the Haley vote to Trump. And so his first instincts on Israel were both good policy and good politics. 84% of independents support Israel more than Hamas in the conflict. 63% believe a ceasefire should only occur after hostages have been released. The more Biden has pandered to the left by softening his support of Israel, the weaker he looks, the more his foreign policy ratings have declined. Rather than pull decisively away from Israel, Biden should instead find a plan that enables Israel to go into Rafah and has enough precautions for Rafah civilians so the American president can back it. He says that his energy policies are geared toward the left. Wrong move. He says that his policies on crime and immigration are geared toward the left. Wrong move. He says Mr. Biden is seen as older. The assessment of the job he has done is in the negatives. While he won't get any younger, he could still move more to the center, hoover up swing voters who desperately want to reject Trump, and strengthen his image as a leader by destroying Hamas and rally his base at the end. But that first means pushing back against the base rather than pandering to it. But Joe Biden isn't doing that. James Carville is saying the same thing. He says, Democrats who are whistling past the graveyard and pretending that the appeal to the radicals as opposed to the normies is magically going to save Joe Biden. Those people are delusional. Here's Carville.
In Trump's more ahead than he's ever been. Fewer people think January 6th was any kind of what it was, as an assault on the temple of democracy, the Constitution. I don't know whatever the you want to say. It's going the wrong way. It's not working. Everything that we're throwing is spaghetti at a wall, and none of it is sticking, me included.
Correct. You know why? Because Joe Biden is not appealing to anyone even remotely near the center of the political spectrum. Independents are turning away from him en masse. I can't tell you, on the Israel issue, how many Jewish liberals I've talked to over the course of the last week since Joe Biden made his major reversal on Israel, who have said, even if they can't bring themselves to vote for Donald Trump, they'll vote for RFK. They just won't vote. Tons of them. Okay, Joe Biden has made clear his disdain for the moderate middle of the country, for the normies. He's made his disdain absolutely clear for them. And they are rejecting him wholesale. And the Gaza situation is just the latest indicator of that. Joe Biden is held captive by his own base. And by the way, lying to the American people. So we heard from the Biden administration that only very recently did they decide that they were basically going to hamstring Israel in their attempts to finish the war in the Gaza Strip, which again is pragmatically idiotic. It's really stupid because it means that this war is going to continue to be at the top of the headlines all the way through the Democratic convention, which is precisely what he wishes to avoid since he wants to appease his left-wing base. There are two ways to appease the left-wing base. One way is to continue to undermine Israel and hope that these people will come around, which they won't. They're radicals by nature. The second is to let Israel finish the job and then turn around and appease the left-wing base with something else, which is a lot easier. But Biden, because he's a fool and because the people around him are committed ideologically to the idea that an Israeli victory is bad for the Middle East for some reason. Because of that, Joe Biden is doing the wrong things politically. And in fact, the Biden administration over the weekend, a couple of pieces of news that are just absolutely shocking in terms of Joe Biden's cave to Hamas. Piece number one, Joe Biden was rethinking his support for Israel by February. By February. According to the New York Times, President Biden laid it out for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel long before the public knew. In a conversation bristling with tension on February 11th, the president warned the prime minister against a major assault on the Gaza city of Rafah and suggested that continued U.S. support would depend on how Israel proceeded. It was an extraordinary moment. For the first time, the president who had so strongly backed Israel's war against Hamas was essentially threatening to change course. The White House, however, kept the threat secret, making no mention of it in the official statement it released about the call. 6 days later, on February 17th, Mr. Biden heard from Secretary of State Antony Blinken. The president's chief diplomat was calling from his blue and white government plane as he was heading home from a security conference in Munich. Despite the president's warning, Blinken reported the momentum for an invasion of Rafah was building. It could result in a humanitarian catastrophe, he feared. They had to draw a line. So this was going since February, and he just lied to the American public about all of this. Why? Because in February, there was widespread support for Israel finishing the war. So Biden slow-played it, and behind the scenes, he threatened Israel, which, by the way, plays exactly into the hands of Hamas. The New York Times, same day, says that Yahya Sinwar, what is his plan here? This is a direct quote from the New York Times. What is the leader of Hamas's plan in this war, where he started a war with a militarily superior power who's wiped out probably half his troop strength? Quote, Israeli and U.S. intelligence officers say Sinwar's strategy is to keep the war going for as long as it takes to shred Israel's international reputation and to damage its relationship with its primary ally, the United States. As Israel faced intense pressure to avoid launching an operation in Rafah, Hamas fired rockets last Sunday from Rafah toward a nearby border crossing, killing 4 Israeli soldiers. So in other words, the basic idea here is that Hamas is counting on Joe Biden and the international left, the army of losers, to save it. It wants to maintain the war for as long as possible. And who is caving into that? Joe Biden. Joe Biden is caving into that. Get to more on this in just one moment. First, are you or somebody you know fighting the battle against cancer? For the last 25 years, Invade medical centers have been pioneering personalized, cutting-edge treatment programs for patients all over the world. Invade has been the leader for patients looking for advanced immunotherapy and genetically targeted therapies, all while focusing on fewer side effects and better patient outcomes. As a global leader in oncology care, Invade is committed to healthcare freedom for all. They've spearheaded a revolution in employer health insurance options, empowering companies to provide their employees with access to not only top doctors, hospitals, and technologies, but also the first of its kind nationwide personalized medicine coverage. Invade is doing all of this, plus offering significant tax and cost savings, full transparency, liberation from the grip of commercial insurance carriers. Whether you're a patient in need or a company looking to break free of monopolized healthcare insurance, Invita could have the solution for you. To learn more about their treatment options and their company insurance programs, visit Envita.com or visit EnvitaHealth.com to learn more about their company insurance programs. That's Envita, spelled ENVITA.com for treatment options, or EnvitaHealth.com to learn more about their company insurance programs. How much is Joe Biden caving into this? This is an insane story. Okay, here's the most insane story of the day. You ready for this? Apparently, the United States, Joe Biden, is threatening Israel on the one hand with a stick, which is that if they go into Rafah and finish off the 4 battalions of Hamas fighters who are in the city, that America will cut off certain supply of bombs. On the other hand, they're offering a carrot. What's the carrot that the Biden administration is offering the Israeli government? This is a report from the Washington Post. Quote, the Biden administration has reportedly offered to give Israel sensitive intelligence on the whereabouts of senior Hamas leaders if it agrees to hold off on a long-promised major military operation in Gaza's southernmost city of Rafah. The Washington Post quoted 4 unnamed sources as saying the United States, quote, is offering Israel valuable assistance if it holds back, including sensitive intelligence to help the Israeli military pinpoint the location of Hamas leaders and find the group's hidden tunnels. Do you understand how insane that is? Let me explain in very short words for members of the Biden administration. What they are saying right there is that they know where Hamas's leaders are, presumably including Sinwar, and they have been holding that back from Israel while Sinwar holds American hostages. They have apparently intelligence on where Hamas's leadership is, and they are not telling Israel. But if Israel does not go into Rafah and does not finish off Hamas in Rafah, then maybe they'll give them intelligence on where the leader of the October 7th massacre is, which makes the United States and the Biden administration an ally of Hamas. There's no other way to put that. They're literally bargaining on behalf of Hamas. They're saying, do not go into this area where the Hamas fighters are and kill them all. And if you don't, maybe we'll give you some intel on where the leadership is. That's insane. Can you imagine if an ally did that to America? Can you imagine if the situation was reversed for a second? America was at war in, say, Afghanistan, and Israel knew exactly where Osama bin Laden was. And they said, you know what? We're not going to give you the location of Osama bin Laden. We're not going to tell you. If you give us more aid, then we'll tell you exactly where bin Laden is. Can you imagine if Israel said something like that? The outrage would be insane, as it should be, because it would make Israel effectively an ally of bin Laden. The United States right now is doing that with Yahya Sinwar. According to the Washington Post, they know precisely where Hamas's leadership is. And by the way, Hamas is holding 5 Americans hostage that we know about. And Joe Biden has abandoned those people. He is literally attempting to trade on behalf, he's horse swapping on behalf of Hamas right here, which is nuts. And meanwhile, ratcheting up the pressure on Israel. So Hamas is firing at the Rafah crossing, which is where humanitarian aid goes in. They're stopping humanitarian aid from going in. There's film over the weekend emerging of members of Hamas literally shooting civilians trying to get humanitarian aid. So where's the Biden administration putting its pressure? On Israel, of course. So they're doing so through a variety of different methods. One of those is a State Department report. So first of all, the State Department has been an Arabist trash heap for as long as I've been alive. The State Department needs to be cleaned out forthwith. If Donald Trump wins, I hope he puts back in charge somebody like Mike Pompeo, and I hope that Mike Pompeo fires everyone. You want to talk about a deep state? The State Department has been its own deep state for generations in American foreign policy. It is a garbage heap of echo chamber left-wingers who emerged from the Georgetown University School of Foreign Policy. They don't know anything. They don't have any centralizing set of American values. They're a joke, in other words. So the State Department put out a report on whether Israel is obeying international law obligations. Now, I should point out at this point that Israel's ratio of terrorists killed to civilians killed in urban warfare here is the best ratio in the history of urban warfare, in its history of all urban warfare anywhere on earth. In fact, the United Nations, very quietly over the weekend, the Mos Eisley of foreign policy, a wretched hive of scum and villainy, as I've said. According to the Jerusalem Post, the United States seemingly halved the estimated number of women and children killed in Gaza, according to data published May 6th and 8th. The UN published the number of fatalities reported by the Hamas-run Gaza Ministry of Health. The government media office in Gaza and Israeli authorities provided a disclaimer below the data. On May 6th, the UN published data showing 34,735 people had reportedly been killed in Gaza, including over 9,500 women and over 14,500 children. On May 8th, the UN published data showing 34,844 people had reportedly been killed, including 4,959 women and 797 children. So in other words, they cut the number of supposed innocents by half, by literally half, and no one noticed. These are the same people whose numbers are being trusted by the Biden administration, which is totally insane. By the way, if you believe the Hamas numbers, you're out of your mind. Hamas, you know how long it takes to actually come up with casualty numbers? It took Israel months to figure out how many people were actually dead on October 7th. Hamas is coming out with statistics, but no names every single day, which is crazy. Get to more on this in just one moment. First, an eternal truth. Vegetables are horrifying. They taste bad. Brussels sprouts, for instance, they taste bad, and then they stick with you for literally ever. What are they supposed to be? Like tiny cabbages. They're the worst. Well, I don't have to worry about eating them. Neither do you. With Balance of Nature fruits and veggies. Balance of Nature fruits and veggies is the most convenient way to ensure you get your daily intake of fruits and veggies. Balance of Nature uses an advanced cold vacuum process that encapsulates fruits and veggies into whole food supplements without sacrificing those natural antioxidants. The capsules are completely void of additives, fillers, extracts, synthetics, pesticides, or added sugar. The only thing in Balance of Nature's fruit and veggie capsules are, like fruits and veggies. You need nutrients to function at your best each and every day. Balance of Nature helps you do just that. And it's kosher, which means I can use it myself in the protein smoothies so I can keep this rockin' bod going. Go to balanceofnature.com, use promo code Shapiro to get 35% off your first set of fruits and veggies, plus an additional $10 off every additional set you buy. That's balanceofnature.com, promo code Shapiro, balanceofnature.com, promo code Shapiro. Okay, so the State Department put out a report. What was their report? Their report is that Israel did not violate international law, but it's reasonable to think they might have, which is like, I'm sorry. I understand that you're trying to provide cover to the Biden administration's disgusting foreign policy objective of undermining Israel's safety and security in the name of the army of losers. I understand that's what you're trying to do, but that's not what you were asked. The question is, do you have evidence that Israel violated international law? The answer to that question, according to the State Department, is no. But then they add a caveat. It's reasonable to assess that perhaps they might have under certain circumstances. Quote, this is the New York Times. The Biden administration believes that Israel has most likely violated international standards in failing to protect civilians in Gaza, but has not found specific instances that would justify the withholding of military aid. The State Department said in a written report, Israel, quote, has the knowledge, experience, and tools to implement best practices for mitigating civilian harm in its military operations. But it added that, quote, the results on the ground, including high levels of civilian casualties, raise substantial questions. Even so, the report, which seemed at odds with itself in places, said the United States had no hard proof of Israeli violations. So the report, which is mandated by President Biden, makes a distinction between the possibility that Israel has violated the law and any conclusions about specific incidents that would prove it. So in other words, they have no specific evidence at all that Israel violated international law, but maybe they did, which is the State Department weaseling its way into withdrawing aid for Israel on the basis of literally no evidence, as they freely admit. You want to talk about a set of perverse incentives for Hamas? So the United States is currently acting as sword and shield for Hamas, protecting Hamas's leadership from Israel, offering that maybe in exchange for Israel not going into Rafah, and simultaneously undermining Israel's international credibility by saying that even though they have no evidence of international law violations, maybe they violated international law. Well, I have no evidence that Joe Biden murders puppies, but maybe it's reasonable to assume that under certain circumstances he might have murdered a puppy. That's an absurd contention. It's ridiculous. Where, if you have evidence, present your evidence. And when you say that the number of civilian casualties is such as to suggest that they probably or likely or maybe violated international law, that in and of itself is a lie. The United States has never fought a war in an urban environment with as low a ratio between terrorist deaths and civilian deaths as Israel is currently fighting. And yet the State Department, because again, they are oriented toward an outcome, and that outcome is backing Joe Biden's propaganda efforts on behalf of Hamas. Because again, he wants to win that army of losers. That's what this is all about. That's what they're doing. So Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, he spent the weekend defending Joe Biden's reversal on Israel. He said, for example, that Israel should get out of Gaza. Here he was delivering his strongest rebuke of Israel yet.
We believe two things. One, you have to have a clear, credible plan to protect civilians, which we haven't seen. Mm-hmm. Second, we also need to see a plan for what happens after this conflict in Gaza is over. And we still haven't seen that, because what are we seeing right now? We're seeing parts of Gaza that Israel has cleared of Hamas, where Hamas is coming back, right, including in the north, including in Khan Yunis. As we look at Rafah, they may go in and have some initial success, but potentially at an incredibly high cost to civilians, but one that is not durable, one that's not sustainable. And they will be left holding the bag on an enduring insurgency, because a lot of armed Hamas will be left, no matter what they do in Rafah. Or if they leave and get out of Gaza, as we believe they need to do, then you're going to have a vacuum, and a vacuum that's likely to be filled by chaos, by anarchy, and ultimately by Hamas again. Yeah. So we've been working for many weeks on developing credible plans for security, for governance, for rebuilding. We haven't seen that come from Israel. We've been working with Arab countries and others on that plan. Mm-hmm. We need to see that too.
They want Israel to get out of Gaza. So the last time Israel got out of Gaza, for 20 years, they got October 7th. Right now, Hamas is holding Americans, and the United States Secretary of State is saying that their top goal is getting Israel out of Gaza. And then he offers a catch-22. If Israel stays in and provides counterinsurgency operations, which is what is going to happen here, then, well, you know, that shows it's bad, because it shows that there's an insurgency, because if there's an insurgency, you need a counterinsurgency. On the other hand, if Israel gets out, there will be a complete vacuum that will be filled by Hamas. And so he's created a plan. Okay, so what's the plan? Really, what's the plan? I'd love to hear it. So yesterday, the Emiratis, the UAE, it was implied that maybe they would be part of the rebuild. They're like, nope, not interested. Egypt, like, nope, not interested. Jordan, nope, not interested. The Palestinian Authority can't even control the West Bank. The Palestinian Authority yesterday said they don't want control of the Rafah crossing. No one wants the Gaza Strip. Why? Because it is filled with terrorist supporters who love Hamas. Everyone knows this. This is why there was a problem there to begin with. When Tony Blinken says Israel should get out of Gaza, Israel tried to get out of Gaza. You think Israel wants its own soldiers in harm's way in Gaza? Over the weekend, 5 Israeli soldiers were killed. You think that Israel is desperate to have its men and women in harm's way in Gaza? Of course not. But Tony Blinken is trying to create pressure on Israel to do what? To do what? The answer is to end in a stalemated war like Ukraine-Russia that somehow results in what? A calm? There will be no calm. It'll just be a continuing counterinsurgency operation no matter what. We'll get to more Tony Blinken in just 1 second because I got to say, the Biden administration, you want to instill non-confidence in Americans, this is the way to do it. First, Responsible Man. It's a men's vitamin and supplement brand that isn't just for the gym bros, but for every dude on a journey to be his best as a husband, as a dad, as a citizen. The Emerson multivitamin may be the finest men's multivitamin on the market. The problem is your modern diet is often deficient in key vitamins and minerals, leaving you weakened and diminished, unable to reach that full potential of the solution. This right here, the Emerson multivitamin. It's a physician-formulated, robust supplement made up of 33 key premium ingredients, helping to fill that nutrient gap to support your immune system, maintain energy production, sharpen brain cognition, and support the health of your heart and muscles. Emerson comes in an exceptional matte black aluminum tin, so it looks nice on your counter. The manly green vitamin capsules. They are smooth, easy to take, and best part, they are mint essenced for that great smell and taste. The woke left loves to celebrate when it sees dudes fail. With so much wokeness causing chaos and uncertainty, it's crucial you take charge of your mind and body. It starts with the Emerson multivitamin, a simple daily discipline to make the most of yourself, live up to your responsibilities, and exceed the expectations of others. Visit responsibleman.com. Save 30% on your subscription of the Emerson multivitamin with this exclusive launch sale. It's still in stock. It ships immediately when you purchase at responsibleman.com. There's a limited number available, so take advantage of this launch deal. Save 30%. That's responsibleman.com to take responsibility today. Okay, meanwhile, now again, our Secretary of State has been deployed on national television to undermine Israel in the middle of a war with a terrorist group holding American hostages. It's totally crazy. And as I say before, this is only about winning that radical base. That is what this is about for Joe Biden. He believes that his Democratic Party base is demanding that he undercut Israel. In reality, the vast majority of the Democratic Party base don't care about this issue at all. Not just that, the moderates actively do not like the approach that Joe Biden is taking right now. Independents do not like the approach Joe Biden is taking. Doesn't matter. Tony Blinken is going to be deployed to undermine the Democratic ally while standing for the terrorist group. Here is Tony Blinken suggesting that Israel is engaged in certain acts which may be inconsistent with international law. He has no actual evidence of this, but he's going to say it anyway.
I think the report makes clear that while Israel has processes, procedures, rules, regulations to try to minimize civilian harm, given the impact that this operation, this war in Gaza has had on the civilian population.
And yet you're still surging weapons to Israel.
Those have not been applied consistently and effectively. There's a gap between the stated intent and some of the results we've seen. But because it's so complicated, in the midst of a war, and particularly in the midst of a war where you have an enemy that hides in civilian infrastructure, hides behind civilians, to make final determinations on these individual incidents. We're looking at the totality of what's happened. We think it's reasonable to assess, based on what's happened, that there have been acts that have been inconsistent with Israel's obligations under international humanitarian law, but we haven't drawn definitive conclusions. We need to pursue these investigations, just as Israel is doing itself.
Okay, literally the reason he is doing this is to provide cover for Hamas. That is what that is. It is flying cover for Hamas. What he's saying there, in short, is we do not have evidence that Israel has violated international law. But there are dead civilians because Hamas is hiding beneath civilians. Therefore, it might be Israel's fault. That's literally what he's saying. And the only reason to do that is to create pressure on Israel to do what? Let's say that Israel doesn't go into Rafah. Let's say that Israel just sits outside Rafah and they create a cordon around Rafah. Do you think at that point that Biden is going to suddenly let up on his pressure? He won't. And you know why? Because the left-wing base will never let him do it. If Israel pulled out of Gaza tomorrow and said, guys, have at it. All you. We're just going to come in every so often, kill some terrorists in Khan Yunis. But for the rest of it, your ball game. Your ball game. Do whatever you want. You can't get weapons in. You can't get weapons out. But it's all your problem. Do you think the Biden administration will be okay with that? The answer, of course, is no, because nothing that Israel does is sufficient for the left-wing base that is screaming at the Biden administration and to which Biden has decided to make himself subject, which is insane. The reason, again, he is split. The problem for him is that this is actually splitting the Democratic Party. So on the one side of the Democratic Party, you have dolts like Bernie Sanders, who, again, as Jewish as a ham sandwich, Bernie Sanders, here he was over the weekend suggesting there should not be another nickel in military aid, says the old communist.
Chris and I have a lot of respect for Tony Blinken. He has an impossibly difficult job. But the reality is I think any objective observer knows Israel has broken international law. It has broken American law. And in my view, Israel should not be receiving another nickel in U.S. military aid.
He literally has no evidence for any of the propositions that he just stated. You know who else doesn't? Senator Chris Murphy. So Chris Murphy also spent the weekend on the TVs. And Senator Murphy from Connecticut, he said that while he supports Biden's decision to withhold military aid, he was then asked, okay, so what would you do differently? If you were Israel, what would you do differently? He has no answers because there are no answers. Hamas is literally hiding in tunnels beneath the civilian population, and Israel has now sacrificed nearly 300 Israeli soldiers who are dead because they decided to go house to house in Gaza rather than just bombing the hell out of the place. Chris Murphy doesn't have an answer here because there is no answer. It's not about practical policy. It is about politics. That's all.
If you were president, or if you were completely directing the war, even in Israel, how would you eliminate Hamas in a way that's different and more effective than what you're describing? Because the understatement of the year is it ain't easy.
Well, let's just make sure that we understand there is a limit to American influence on Israeli politics.
But what do you think Israel should be doing?
So I think Israel should be open to bringing in the Palestinian Authority to be a transition governance structure inside Gaza.
But how does that eliminate Hamas?
That is something that is, well, listen, I think every intelligence expert has already come to the conclusion you are not going to be able to eliminate Hamas, right? There's going to continue to be a resistance movement to the state of Israel. And the question is it going to be weaker or stronger after 13 to 15,000 kids are killed inside Gaza? My argument is that right now the prospects are that it is going to be stronger.
Okay, so the answer is he literally has no answer. His answer as far as extirpating Hamas, it's don't. Leave them there. They're fine. And bring in the Palestinian Authority, who is literally in alliance with Hamas in its desire to destroy the state of Israel. They hate each other, the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. They teach their kids the exact same thing, which is the destruction of the state of Israel. The Palestinian Authority somehow becoming a legitimate peace partner while being led by a Holocaust denier and being founded by Yasser Arafat is totally insane. But that is the answer for the Democrats, because again, it's not about principle at all, at all, at all. As Representative Michael McCaul of Texas was saying over the weekend, the Republican side of the aisle, he says basically the Biden administration's position is that during World War II, the Allies should get right up to the edges of Berlin and then stop.
Here's what I object to, Martha, is to say just point blank that we are not going to give weapons to Israel if they invade Rafah. Now, of course, you want the conditions with humanitarian to be in place. Of course, you want the tents in place. But to say you cannot invade Rafah, we're telling the Israelis, dictating their military strategy. This is the last point, the last step in the completion of their military objective. And for us to step in and say, no, you can't go into Rafah and finish the job, I think it's tantamount to an arms embargo. It's also very similar for us to say in World War II, hey, like my dad's generation, you can invade all the way up to Berlin, but you can't go into Berlin to finish the job.
This is splitting the Democratic Party. So this is not just splitting America. It's splitting the Democratic Party. Because again, only a fairly small percentage of Americans are sympathetic to the claims of Hamas. The Democratic Party is split, which is why you're seeing the Biden administration now try to play both sides. So U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Jack Lew, insisted on Sunday evening that, quote, fundamentally, nothing has changed in the basic relationship between Israel and the United States. He said it's only about one set of munitions that's been held back. He said everything else keeps flowing. He said the two sides need to keep talking through issues relating to the use of large diameter bombs. But I think it's a mistake to think anything has fundamentally changed. So they're trying to buy it back now. Even Jake Sullivan, the architect of this garbage policy, the national security advisor, he tried to walk back this whole thing over the weekend.
First, because there's 1 million people there in very close quarters who've been pushed there because of the military operations in other parts of Gaza, you would have really significant civilian casualties. And while Israel would also be able to kill some Hamas folks, many Hamas folks would melt away because they're terrorists. They're not really organized fighters in the way that we think about a typical military. In that context, he doesn't want to see American weapons used in that kind of operation. That's not to say that he is going to abandon Israel or cut them off from weapons. He was focused on a particular operation that he doesn't believe will succeed in defeating Hamas and that will cause grievous harm.
Okay, so now he's trying to minimize it to it's just about Rafah. It's not about a broader arms conflict. It's not about a broader problem with Israel's government after he literally deployed the Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, to call for the ouster of Israel's current government. Yeah, good luck with this particular cell. Meanwhile, Donald Trump absolute moral clarity on this. Here he was over the weekend in front of 100,000 people over the weekend. Here he was talking about Israel's right to win.
This week he announced that he will withhold shipping weapons to Israel as they fight to eradicate Hamas terrorists in Gaza. No, it was shocking to hear it. Even while there are still American hostages being held by Hamas. And they're saying, oh, October 7th never happened. You know, they say that. And Biden has fallen for it. Crooked Joe's action is one of the worst betrayals of an American ally in the history of our country. I support Israel's right to win its war on terror. Is that okay? I don't know. I don't know if that's good or bad politically. I don't care. You got to do what's right.
Correct. By the way, this is the widespread view inside the Republican Party, except for a very small fringe of kooks. J.D. Vance, senator from Ohio, who's widely considered to be one of the more isolationist senators. Here's what he had to say over the weekend about letting Israel finish the job.
The final point here, Dana, I think is very important. Our goal in the Middle East should be to allow the Israelis to get to some good place with the Saudi Arabians and other Gulf Arab states. There is no way that we can do that unless the Israelis finish the job with Hamas. If they can't even do that, the attitude in the Middle East will be, you can't trust these guys. They're not pursuing their own national security. So we've got to let them finish this job. And I think hopefully on the other end of it, get to a new era in the Middle East.
This is correct. And it is that sort of clarity on the Republican side of the aisle and that sort of lack of clarity on the Democratic side of the aisle, which is why Joe Biden is losing. He's abandoned the normies, and now the normies are abandoning him. Okay, meanwhile, it is clear that the Stormy Daniels idiotic trial that's happening in New York is having no impact on Donald Trump. I mean, by the polls, it's having no impact on Donald Trump. Supposedly, now Michael Cohen's testimony is going to hurt Donald Trump. Good luck. It's not going to do a damned thing because no one cares about this stupid case in the first place. This idea that Donald Trump had a payoff to a star and that this is supposed to somehow land him in jail after not being prosecuted federally is absurd on its face. But according to the Associated Press, the star prosecution witness in Donald Trump's hush money trial is set to take the stand Monday with testimony that could help shape the outcome of the first criminal case against an American president. Michael Cohen, Trump's former lawyer and personal fixer, is by far the Manhattan District Attorney's most important witness in the case. There's only one problem. He's already been convicted of perjury. So the defense presumably will rip him up on all of that. And no one cares about this. Even if Donald Trump is convicted in this particular case, unless he gets sent to jail, it will have no impact on the election. None. Because everybody who believes that this is a trumped up charge is going to still believe that afterward. And everybody who believes that this is a legit charge is still going to believe that afterward. And nothing is going to change. Because there's been a seamy and stupid attempt to get the former president of the United States. It is, in fact, election interference by Alvin Bragg. Everybody knows that at this point. Even Fareed Zakaria, who over on CNN, who certainly is not a friend of Donald Trump, was like, yeah, this is ridiculous.
Meanwhile, Republicans seem to be uniting behind Trump. Whatever opposition he faced in the primaries has largely melted away. And the trials against him keep him in the spotlight, infuriate his base, who sees him as a martyr, and even may serve to make him the object of some sympathy among people in general who believe that his prosecutors are politically motivated. This happens to be true, in my opinion. I doubt the New York indictment would have been brought against a defendant whose name was not Donald Trump.
Correct. By the way, I should mention here, one of Trump's single greatest tweets. I mean, Trump has a history of wonderful tweets. His single greatest tweet was about Michael Cohen, and it went like this, quote, "If anyone is looking for a good lawyer, I would strongly suggest that you don't retain the services of Michael Cohen," who's today's witness. So, yeah, again, this idea that Donald Trump is going to be brought low by Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels, that was a resistance fantasy when Trump was president, let alone in his post-presidency. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has been sort of giving some hints about who he might pick for VP. He's ruling out Nikki Haley. That is largely because Nikki Haley ran a very strong and anti-Trump campaign against Trump during the primaries. He says he wishes her well because, of course, she's now lost. So there's no reason for him to continue to stomp on her. But he said Nikki Haley is not under consideration for the VP slot. So Donald Trump right now, top of the list is probably somebody like J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, and Tim Scott. That's probably the top of the list. Kristi Noem, obviously, her chances are not looking good in the aftermath of killing a puppy. As it turns out, that is not a strong electoral strategy. But as long as Trump picks somebody reasonable for VP, it's going to strengthen his ticket. All he has to do is pick somebody even half reasonable for VP, and he's running against Joe Biden and the least likable vice presidential candidate in human history, Kamala Harris. So it'll be fascinating to see who he picks. Again, Donald Trump is running a much more coherent and cohesive campaign this time around, oddly enough helped by the fact that he has to spend all this time in court. It means he can only do one of these big events a weekend. It means that he's not spending all of his time on Twitter. The Twitter ban has helped him remarkably. The fact that he is on Truth Social and not on Twitter means that whenever he feels like voiding his bowels on the internet, that he does so on a site that very few people actually look at, as opposed to Twitter, where every new Trump tweet set the world ablaze. Trump is in very handy position right now in the election. The election is clearly about Joe Biden and not about Donald Trump. And if that's the case, Donald Trump is going to win. That is the current situation. And again, Biden is giving Trump something new to bang him with every single day. It is a fascinatingly bad campaign being run by Joe Biden at this point. Alrighty, guys, the rest of the show continues right now. We'll be getting into the fact that nobody's having babies and everybody's retiring too soon. So we got a pretty bad economic future coming up. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us.